Hello.
How are you doing?
Super with a capital duper. How are you?
Great, thank you.
I'm a big fan of your work.
Oh, thank you.
You're my favorite. Everything you do, I'm just like, holy shit. This is so incredible. I'm so impressed. I plan on jumping into your programs at some point in the future, but so excited to talk to you and so excited that you've got some programs around aggression.
Yeah, I'm still building my online presence and I'm still building my programs as well. At some point, I do want to get a puppy and film everything. I take my dogs to the firing range. I take my dog swimming. I go hiking. I go biking with my dogs. I involve my dog, even though he's aggressive, I involve him in every aspect of my life. And I absolutely love him to pieces. And for me, the aggression can sometimes be a pain in the butt, but it's really not something that actually holds me back. So that's something that I want to capitalize on in the future is getting a puppy and developing my own program and showing people, okay, I'm noticing this from my puppy. Maybe it's a fear response over something weird and like counting how quickly is the recovery. Is it like a nervy dog or what this dog is best suited for? I actually just ended a podcast with the PSA and IPO certified decoy just before you came on. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just looked back today. It's like, what am I doing? But that's something that I would like to do because I feel like there's a shift in the sports world and there's a shift in enthusiasts as well, because there's a lot of old school sports people that have their dogs still kenneled. Like they only kennel them and they bring them out to work them and then put them away, which they're neurotic, but they work really well. They're very driven for their job. But for me, I did something totally different. My dog came from police working lines. I bought him off of a federal officer. I have a lot of respect for police and military and what they do for us and our animals. I was in Army Cadets myself throughout my teenagehood, climbed the ranks and did Germany exchange. My reserve papers were signed by my parents and I had everything ready to go to the military. And when I had some interviews, I was like, I want to be a canine handler. I absolutely want to work with animals. And they're like, we can't guarantee that. And so because I couldn't guarantee that, I'm like, screw it. I am going to go learn on my own. I just have a passion for learning about animals and learning about dog training. I feel like there's no ceiling. I just feel like a person needs to keep learning.
So that's great. So I think you're actually hitting on something that I don't really think anyone's talking about. Everyone talks about how to squeeze the lemon to make lemonade, but no one's talking about exposure and creating a dog that can be outside of their kennel, your home, and society, a dog that possesses that kind of impulse, if you will. So
definitely that.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think you want to talk about how to properly, what the exposure work might look like? Or
I can touch base, like if you wanted to do a general overall, you want to talk about what I did for development, even though recognizing that he had that reactivity and aggression and impulse issues from early on, and how I work with him on the street and how I set up lessons so that I can work in the field and have few neutral dogs around, like his setup is so important. And for him, he was the type of dog I didn't want to, snuff out drives, kill drive. For me, performance was priority over his issues, and hindsight is 2020, of course, too, because I felt like you had to pick one or the other because I prioritized the performance. So I'm like, you know what? Yeah, you may be a little aggressive. Yeah, you may do this, but I'm going to take that energy and I'm going to move it to something productive. So I want you to see that target. I'm okay that you're getting energized off that target. Now let's switch it. And I can take my dog from going full out reactive to into a heel. And then he's vocal, he's drive leaking, but he's given me some of the best performances he's had, especially walking around dogs.
Okay. So you're using it and channeling it into performance, into function. Do you, at some point, as you continue with this sort of exposure work and he starts to understand these detours, and does he then not maybe fully commit to full displays towards the environment, knowing that the game is going to begin, knowing that mom's going to channel it? Do you find like that there's a patent detour there, or do you still communicate?
No, I have to communicate because he will try to take on any dog of any size, really. It doesn't matter for him. The dogs that he was growing up around are the only dogs that he can be muzzleless with. But in terms of new dogs coming in, my best friend's dog, we're best friends for 24 years, so our friendship's not going anywhere. So the dogs have to be managed, and she has an intact shepherd, and he's dominant, and my dog is more dominant, so they don't get along. They're both intact male. And I personally always have muzzle, and I want to work a little closer together with her. I'm going, okay, instead of hanging out, I want us to just create an atmosphere where we can actually correct some of these issues. But for Viker, I'm going to see, because in the past, I go to correct these issues and I've tried various different methods and techniques. He goes back as soon as you could correct him hard for one dog. He's like, okay, fine. And then another dog walks around the corner. It just doesn't matter to him. He just goes into that zone, and it's a very red zone. But he's never been aggressive to me, ever.
Yes, he doesn't redirect at all.
I was very cautious of that, raising him. I never wanted to create conflict with him. That was also a priority for me, is that he's going to be a strong dog and he could easily overpower me if he wanted to. And I was very aware of that. So I really wanted to create a good relationship with him where he could trust me, but also understand if I'm giving him a correction that it's not a means for him to get so pissed off at me that he redirects.
So it's clear to him. It's more communication than anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess the interesting question is, so you're taking him out to all these places. It's not a limiting factor. And more importantly, you're leaning into these different environments and exposing him to these different environments. Where would you say that the success comes from? If one correction for one dog tempers him and he goes, got it, mom, and then a new dog comes around the corner, where do you make the strides there for him to start altering and making different choices?
For him, it's like for all my clients' dogs, they like channel in perfectly and they learn, they get it. But for him, and I think part of it is genetics. He comes from Vandalin Dutch Shepherd lines, which are known for aggression. So I do think there is a genetic factor there, not trying to make excuses because, my gosh, I'm open to learning with this sort of thing. But for him, if I see him looking and loading, because he's almost like a pit bull, it's 2 seconds and then he's just like zoned, his hackles are up and he's leaning into whatever. It doesn't matter if the dog is not even looking at him. He's just, there's a dog loading and he loads very quickly. So when I see him in that moment, I'm like, okay, let's do this instead. And that's from utilizing his energy from early that I can switch him back out again.
Got it. So you got him loading, you got the adrenaline starting to course, his muscles are tensing, his respiratory system's increasing, and you're using that as gas in the tank and giving him an outlet, so to speak. So when you see him fire off into those beautiful movements that I always see on your social media where he just looks like a fucking Ferrari, do you see that alleviates some of the pressure that he's able to let it out and move with you and commit to you?
Yes. Yeah, it does help a lot. And I can literally, in those moments, if the dog is here, I can walk right past them. I can pop them into a focused heel and just ask it. But I'm also handling the leash too, because I don't want mistakes to happen. I also go into some management mode as well. But basically, like, I just pop him into the heel and then the leash is right there that if he goes to divert, it's almost like a self-correction in some ways because he moves so fast, like he's going to hit the end, but it's also a very loose leash in the sense there's no pressure around the neck when he's doing exactly what I'm asking.
I really like that. So I think about that often too, as far as the action, his action creating the communication and hitting the end of a collar for him to go, got it.
Just rechannels him.
Yeah. Are you applying any interruption cues when that happens, or you just let him hit the end of it and you communicate to do something else? Wrist flick.
Just a wrist flick.
Got
Yeah.
it. So like haptic feedback. Ow, mom's talking, come back.
Yeah.
Got it.
And it's not even an ouch for him. It's just enough for him to go, okay. And he just snaps back.
Yeah. And then do you use those moments to actually incorporate training and raise criteria, or do you keep it linear to when this happens, I want to contact heel, and that's the default behavior we're going to continually do?
It depends on the environment. So I can't really work on those environments if I'm out on a patio with some friends, but I always sit in a position where I can get up and move with my dog. Like, you have to be aware of your surroundings and where dogs can come in from. Where I usually sit at one of the patios, so when me and my girlfriends go out or me and my fellow goes out, I'm able to see in the parking lot if anyone's coming up the back way. So if someone's coming up the back way, I can already have Viker channeled in and it's not this big explosion. Or I can directly see down the line and see if someone is entering the environment. So that way I can work on saying, leave it, never mind, those sort of things. So there's management in those environments. But then if I'm in my training field and I can set up a lesson, then I'm like, okay, now's the time to see what choices you're going to make. And as soon as he is either corrected or channeled, then I can use that for any obedience, like between left heeling. I can literally like heel close to a dog, look at the dog, and then look back into a heel. Like, I can literally use a dog as a source of energy and say, look at the dog. Okay, now focus back, and then go into a heel. So
almost like targeting a toy, he would focus on the dog.
Exactly. I can get him to look with a focalization and then boost, and then back into the heel again.
Yeah, that's awesome. But it also tells you that he knows he's doing his job. He knows he's performing. But then I would also imagine that you have to be particularly careful in turning these settings, these public settings. Even I would see why you might be more management than more training, because you have a dog that's a fucking lot and you don't want him fully training in public environments. You probably want to leash the beast.
And he's very vocal.
Yeah.
Say quiet, and he's like, it just keeps going. So, yeah, it's hey, I'm over here, guys. Why don't I have a red neon light?
So management-centric training versus training-centric training.
Yes,
right? Like, you can't let him bust a move in these environments, and he will bust a move. So you
bust a move.
Yeah, I understand. So you have to be very concise and very specific. But what about the reinforcement coming at the end of that? I'm sure you've moved to like crazy variable reinforcement schedules to where he doesn't expect things so readily. What is it? What does the reinforcement look like? I wish that we had just done the podcast today, because I get really curious and I start asking a lot of questions because I really like where this is going. Is he expecting a reward there? And if so, what is he getting?
I personally always go with some form of reward on me, even if it's just like one of those little tiny pocket tugs that I can shove in my jean pockets or something. Or I always carry a little bit of food in my pocket as well. So there's always a little bit of a higher value reward. Nothing is as high as getting adrenalized and excited over a dog, another dog, or a decoy. Those are the two things that he's
even the boss seeing going psychopath over in your videos, it's
he's higher drive.
Dog? Oh wow.
Yeah, it's decoy and dog, but he can channel even when there's other dogs there barking at him. He can completely channel to decoy, and then decoy and dog top, and then there's ball, and then
focusing on the adrenaline and the drive channeling that you're doing, would you say that the progress that you make on the highest value motivator on the field also helps with some of these adrenalized circumstances with dogs too?
I would say that it helps the dog understand how to channel better overall. Again, you're not fixing issues though. You're more so managing them and switching the energy, but you're not exactly fixing the entire issue, because like I said before, like I've worked on trying to correct these issues in the past, and it doesn't seem to work for him. Like I would do 3 or 4 times and then I make notes. Like you look at micro cues and all that stuff to see if there's any progress at all. And if I'm not noticing any change whatsoever, I stop doing what I'm doing, because I feel that there's a point of this becomes abuse if it's not working. And so why keep putting the pressure on my dog? I don't want to hurt the relationship I have on my dog. I love my dog very much. So if I can channel it and manage it, then that's how I look at it.
Yeah. It's really interesting because as you're talking, you're saying issues. But in reality, you're talking about a line that is built for a performance and an extremity in behaviors that is not conducive for society. So
Correct.
you're really putting the label that society might have on that behavior.
Yeah.
When in
What
reality,
other people would see as issues.
yeah, it's a curse
Yeah.
to someone, but it's a gift to you. Well, the question would be, if you didn't have those issues, quote unquote, would you have some of his superpower? Would it be slighted? His ability to perform and turn up? If you were to crank his dial down with those issues, would it be less dog? And would that less dog impact your goals on the sports side?
That's a really good question. And what I feel is that he wouldn't have as much fire as, say, a non-aggressive dog. So I think a non-aggressive dog, you can still have a very high drive, but very friendly and very bouncy dog. That's high energy. And high energy isn't always high drive, because you need to be able to focus that in and channel it. But I've been able to take that high drive and channel it into a lot of energy and explosive movements and everything. So I do think that you need a little bit of fire in order to have that type of performance.
So I've been talking to a lot of experts, like a lot of vet behaviorists, ethologists, Kim Brophy, and the conversations have always steered around like brain makeup. And it's funny how a lot of conversations we're having, even Kim Brophy, we're talking about working breeds, right? Mm-hmm. Because they're a prime example of a dog that has been, and if you really think about it, we've trained them, artificially selected them to perform. Standard package working breed is bred to respond to stimuli. So they're more likely to respond to various things like dogs, loud sounds, movement, etc. But therein, we took components of, let's just be honest, the kill trait, drive, right? Yep. And we harnessed it to perform. And in the protection breed, we harnessed it to pursue, to lunge, all that good stuff. But what's funny is the difference between your dog and maybe a dog that cannot hear you in those circumstances. American Pit Bull Terrier has had no training, maybe got into a couple fights, is the brain makeup. The fact that the prefrontal cortex, which is the area of the brain responsible for listening to mom and giving that beautiful detour and that beautiful performance and being able to turn on a dime and channel it, isn't online. And the dog cannot hear you.
Auditory exclusion.
Yeah, everything exclusion. When the hypothalamus circuit and the limbic system are engaged and a dog is in prey and the prefrontal cortex is offline, those areas are on, this area is off. That's where a dog can't hear. That's where you could nuke a dog with a e-collar. You could crank a lead. You could do so many different things, but that dog is an animal at that point. There's nothing that resembles listening or hearing or seeing and responding, engaging, if you will. It's an interesting concept. Dogs that can keep the prefrontal cortex online no matter how in charge those other areas of the brain are. And when you think about what's happening in the decoy setting, where you're purposely encouraging, motivating, and guiding a dog to go to the brink of their extreme, right? The extremity in movement and performance, and practicing to keep that prefrontal cortex online through the training method, you get these dogs that can go hard and can still think. And that's what makes the difference between a Dutch Shepherd that's been trained, artificially selected to perform, and maybe a Pit Bull who we've bred to dispatch and we've bred to meet conflict, but there's been no handler there with hundreds and hundreds of years of training in artificial selection. Its lights are off. No one's home when that dog loses control.
But how much of it would be conditioning? Say if you have a Pit Bull and what its genetic traits are, how much could you keep that open if you put it into training in situations where you slowly raise the game over time, because I didn't just, ooh, here's a decoy, good luck. But for a lot of pet owners, that's the case. It's like the equivalent of that when they have their Molosser breed and they're out and their shepherd and they're out and they're going through this. So like how much of it can be mitigated through doing a combination of what you do, being able to correct these issues in a training context as opposed to drive channeling, but then having the background of teaching the dog in terms of obedience. Like, you feel that tug, that means I'm communicating to you. Okay, he knows he has to go and do something. Like, how much can that affect a dog that may not genetically be like a Dutchie? How much can that help a dog? Because I used to deal with really severe aggression cases in the past, and it took months and months to help those dogs, because you're rewiring everything that they're doing. And I wish I knew now when I first started 13 years ago, and I feel like it could have helped even a lot more dogs understand, okay, let's do some relationship building. Let's do some drive channeling with easy stuff like food. Food is like a very basic existential thing. Doesn't mean you have to use food all the time, because some dogs just in a training setting, they just will not. And you sometimes have to work with what the dog can at least give you. If it can give you a little bit, then work with that little bit. And sometimes when you open a dog up a little more through relationship play, then they'll accept food afterwards, because then they're like, oh, okay, I'm comfortable with you. I'm okay doing that. And so I'm wondering, like, how much can we influence if we start with that behavior, like relationship building and obedience first, to make a fast twitch muscle response, that when we start getting into higher drive situations, can we channel that with a dog that may not be predisposed to that?
It's such an interesting question. You talk to different people from different worlds and walks of life in dog training. If you talk to an ethologist, they'll tell you that generational reinforcement history and the epigenetic inheritances of that dog will set a dog's brain makeup and their ability to keep the prefrontal cortex online. But what you are doing is, in my opinion, a missing component to working through extreme behavior. In child psychology, they call it rhythmic attunement. And it's an interesting thing. We've done a lot of studies around fight or flight, but due to the funding of these studies in the brain and how fight or flight works, it's mostly been centered around kids. So there's this technique in polyvagal theory therapy, where if a kid is in fight or flight and in a full-fledged panic, same areas of the brain are in charge around maybe a dog losing control. They perform this technique called rhythmic attunement, which is exactly what you're talking about, which is instead of stifling this outburst where this child is in, you catch it, and by catching it and engaging with it, then you can work on downshifting it. But you don't stifle it and flatten it out. You redirect it, right? And I think there's a missing segment of our industry where a lot of behavior trainers, once you say, I'm force-free, you start prescribing to force-free protocols. And I prescribed to them all. I was a crossover way back when, before I started touching more and more dogs. I still don't use tools. I still stay away from pain. But when I got really familiar with BAT protocols and under threshold work, I was working at the speed where I was saying, okay, distance and duration and keeping the dog under threshold and keeping the dog calm and keeping the dog reinforced and keeping the dog curious is my mode of operation for fixing reactivity. And then my social media blew up and I got dumped on, and I started getting really, I remember it was Danny from Unleashed Canine telling me, you haven't worked true aggression yet. And I'm like, oh shit. And he was absolutely right. I got dumped on aggressive dogs. And I started to realize that you lose efficiency and you're wasting a lot of time with these types of dogs that are bred to respond to stimuli. And so I started learning how to work with dogs when they're in this place and communicate to them and influence them. So if a dog is in fifth gear, can you take that and can you shape that? And there's a gap in the industry with trainers that are prescribing to these philosophies in not building up these skill sets to work with dogs in these states, to work with this level of dog. And it would behoove a lot of trainers who, fine, check the box, like force-free, like you've done the back protocols, you understand cat protocols, fantastic. Now go work with a protection trainer. Now stand in front of a Dutch Shepherd. Now stand in front of Malinois. Now prescribe to people that are taking and shaping a lot of dog into something performance-driven, into something functional, into something healthy.
Yes. So it's like a lot of skill set. And I think that's where a lot of pressure falls back on the handler or the owner, because like you have to know how to move that leash and you need to know how to move that dog before it gets into those high drive states. Because if you don't have those skills when the dog isn't in a high drive, then you're not going to have control. You're just going to be in strict management, hang on for dear life, hope the dog doesn't get away from you mode. And I really feel that there is like a large skill set that people, if they have these types of animals, it's okay. Like when people come to me this morning, I had a blue peeler in, and as soon as he gets aroused, he's like going after the owner, and he's drew blood and stuff like that before. Like he's overexcited, never had a no, basically, that is effective to the dog. And I'm like, you've done purely positive. You're in agility. Agility brings out this excited state. I said, but it's not channel. I said, it is, but it isn't, because the dog is drive leaking onto you. And healers can be handler hard too. So there is that component as well. And I'm like, you're missing a few things, and we're going to work with you and help you touch and bring down that. So that way, when you correct this, you still have drive, but now it's channeled in the right area. That's someone that isn't green into training. Like he's been working with this dog a long time. So I watched him to see what his leash skills are like. I'm evaluating all these things when I see people come into training. As you see this develop, then you can go, oh, okay, that person moved a little bit. Or as opposed to someone that, can you hold a leash? And they're like wrapping it around. And it's just, oh boy, here we go. Let's just, okay, let's start over.
So would you say that the missing component as you work pet owners, sport enthusiast owners with dogs that are putting all of this energy into the environment, that have crossed wires and children are enemies, skateboard people are enemy, whatever. Yeah. Would you say that a big stride in your process is getting them to create that drive through them in the training, to giving that dog the ability to crank and give that outlet through the training to establish a level of comfort that they can do it when that happens in the environment?
Yeah, when I started to learn how to channel energy more, because I went through different canine training systems and everything, and it, not just canine training systems, but like I study a multitude of different trainers. And, it's about, some of them are creating relationships, some of them are positive only, some of them are about threshold work, like you were mentioning before, about work within the dog's thresholds, but don't let them get over the point where they're just losing their mind, and you hopefully close the gap more and more to see if you can help mitigate that. And with a lot of dogs, you can help that in that type of approach and technique. But I think being aware of, I guess, the way that I work with the aggression, stuff like that, is being able to have a dog that can channel their energy with the owner with no distraction. And then we start adding distraction. And then as the dog gets aroused, then once we say correct a dog for a particular issue, like a drive leaking issue, then the dog tends to go back to what they have learned or what they know. And then that's how you can actually facilitate getting rid of garbage behavior or behavioral issues and bringing in the good, because now the dog isn't mouthing at the owner. Now it's not like lunging at the leash. You can say, hey, I need you to channel in right now. I know you feel like doing that, but channel in. And now you get to go do something that you like to do, that you've been taught to do, or that you understand. So having that base of understanding, because the owner has to develop their skills too.
Right.
So they're developing skills together. And then once you start to correct some of those issues afterwards, then the dog goes into having a very clear picture of, okay, every time I do that, it sucks now, so I'm going to focus in on this. And it usually helps them channel in a little bit better. I hope that kind of answers your question.
No, it does. We're all trying to give this animal an outlet there, whether it's learned behavior, understimulated, whether it's maybe a higher purpose animal genetically, and they found their purpose through fence fighting, going nuts in the neighborhood, attacking, whatever. I think everybody is trying to find an outlet for that animal that, one, helps them alleviate some of that pressure and remove some limitations in their life. When you primarily focus on under threshold work, it is environment centric. It is doing exposure work and generalizing like you're talking about with your animal and working in these various places, taking the dog hiking, camping, etc. But I think the difference is that you're creating an outlet through you. And I guess the question would be, there's only so many gears that a dog will go through to achieve cookies, right? Maybe you do some dynamic lure work like Nino, and you're going Tybo with a treat like Nino. But at some point, you have to raise your ability to work with toys, to comfortable with tug work, which can be very precarious for an owner who's got a reactive dog. And you're like, okay, we're going to crank this son of a bitch, and he's coming towards you this time. Are you ready?
And they're like, no, I'm not doing it. And it's, you're going to do it. Hold it up to the side. Dog needs to go through that window. Not you. Don't hold it in front.
But at the end of that, you have a dog that has an outlet. You've strengthened the bond. The dog sees you as that outlet. The dog you are now the funnest thing in that dog's circadian rhythm in that dog's day, comparative to, I really love talking shits to that German Shepherd at 3 p.m. when you walk me. That's the funnest I've had.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like you're saying, you're not allowed to dive into that, but hey, if you pay attention to me, all amazing things can happen to you.
Yeah. So let's just talk about, because you can handle dogs that, like, I personally, there's no way I could work with your dog. Like, I couldn't keep up. My brain doesn't work that fast. If training is a dance, I'm line dancing, right? And you're out there like really doing it at a speed that I don't continually work at, right? And operate in. I don't have access to the dogs you have access to. So my question is, what about when you got the dog that's on the other end of the spectrum and an owner that's on the other end of the spectrum, where you've got to build that drive? That dog, that's a pet King Charles that's never seen a ball in its life and never been engaged with that way at all. Like, how do you help develop that dog and get some drive in that dog, and then also get a owner bought into, okay, so let's give this dog an outlet? Like, how does that work for you?
Yeah, so basically I try to get the owner working with food, any sort of high value food. There's a lot of trainers that work with existential food, but like for me, I don't. For pet owner, do what works. Like, find a high value reward that you can actually work with your dog. Go out, get moving with your dog. And I literally start off with my food bowling techniques, like where you run, throw the food one way, dog goes and chases it. If the dog is starting to chase it, then you can start using a lure. But until that dog is chasing its food, it's really difficult to work with, because you're talking about no drive. Like, below does not care about drive. It's just, oh, okay. And it just goes along its merry way. And until you start creating, it's almost, you're trying to create a little bit of an adrenaline rush using prey type movements to get the dog like, oh, it's on the ground. And then you're trying to, I call it the cat senses, where you see it moving and they start to track it. So once they start to do that, then the owner could see, wow, my dog is having fun doing this. It's actually like running, chasing, capturing, eating. And then once you start doing that, then you can get into movement and flow with the dog. And as the dog is coming, you can have, of course, a low drive dog. They have to see the source. So you hold the food in a way that they can still see it. And you come in and you can move. And it doesn't have to be technical. Oh, I need you in a technical heel. Just movement alone can really help a dog channel in. It doesn't have to be exactly coordinated, and you don't have to have a specific goal, but just movement with your dog and help them have a deeper bond and relationship with you through that movement can go in such a positive direction. So now you are building the skills on how to move. Your dog is understanding now what you're asking of it. And then you can start to go into challenging environments. So if it can do it in the house, move to the backyard, but don't stay stuck in the house, because then that's where you're just going to stay stuck there. But as you notice that the dog is doing quite well or starting to move outside where birds are flying by, neighbor might be going, hey buddy, how are you? Like, and just, keep engaged with the dog, throw a long line on it so it doesn't reverse bad behaviors, for God's sakes. But like, just get them channeled in. And as soon as they're starting to do good, up the value a little bit. Say, hey, Kaylee, I have a dog here I'm working with. Can you neutrally stay with your dog over at the corner while I work this dog? So now you have a dog that's neutral in the corner, and the dog's like, but there's something over there. And you're like, no, come on, channel in. And you're getting them to do it. And it's all short sessions. It doesn't have to be an hour-long session. And I think people are so afraid that, oh, I don't have the time, 10 minutes. 6 minutes. If your dog is that low a drive and you only get a minute, start at a minute. Build, slowly build. The duration and endurance is built over time. It's not immediately the dog can do 40 minutes. We're not talking about exhausting the dog in exercise. You're talking about building something. And for that, you need energy.
I think that's smart. For a newer owner who just saw you and is, oh my gosh, this is amazing, and maybe someone that found you through social media and see what you can do, being, too committed and trying to go out there and do long sessions, most likely you're going to lose that energy, you're going to lose that fun, and it's not going to be fun for the dog, and you're dragging the dog across some sort of perceivable finish line. But
yes,
I love talking to other trainers because I love hearing similarities in point of view. Like, this concept of just move, get the dog stimulated, get the dog seeing you as fun, create some fun, some pursuit first. It's so counterintuitive to how a lot of dog trainers collect a paycheck. A lot of dog trainers grinding for 10 years, they're, paid to correct behaviors. And then one of the first things they might do is stifle a dog and correct the behaviors and devalue those behaviors. Before you give a dog an outlet, before you get a dog moving, before you create an exchange where this dog is enjoying the process.
Yes.
I was going to wager the real theme between great training and not so great training. No matter whether you're doing sport or obedience or working with puppies or working with behavior modification, I think the defining difference is that the dog enjoys the process. You have the ability to get the dog to enjoy your process and actively make choices while they're enjoying the process, which, to your point, like, changes the behavioral economy. That's when the dog goes, okay, dog's neutral in the corner. This is fucking awesome. I enjoy this.
Yeah.
I'm doing this. This is great.
Because, it's taking the dog from seeing something that may have been a previous trigger, like another dog, and making sure that you're set up with a neutral dog first. So that way the owner is prepared and the dog is prepared to handle that within its threshold environment, because like, you probably are like a master at working with thresholds. You're like, if I go like one more foot, it's going to be fireworks. And you maybe eventually want to test that, but in the beginning stages of creating that relationship and flow, for me, I don't care if I have a stiff moving 60-year-old client. I just care that she's connecting with her dog and she's learning to move. She's learning to have fun. And people get worried about if they can move or not. And I'm like, you don't have to move a lot. I said that food bowling exercise is meant to buy you time. As long as the dog is committed to going and getting that food, you could slow shuffle the opposite direction and then throw the food, and then make sure the dog is committed to getting it first, and then slow shuffle away. You can do that.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, behavior modification at core is changing thoughts and changing feelings. And we have that old saying, no one remembers what you said, but they remember how you made them feel. And for some reason, we think that doesn't extend to other species, other mammals in this world, that playing with feelings and harnessing different emotions is a supremely effective way to channel. And all I've heard today from you is about channeling. and using it as opposed to trying to squander it. This has been really awesome.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. By the way, I think we have the episode. We're not going to do better than this.
If we're recording,
we're not going to do better than this. This was a moment where you dropped some bombs and I'm like, holy shit, that's amazing. You're amazing. And it's authentic. And if we redid this, it'd be like, okay, so let's talk about, and it would be too contrived.
I agree.
And to be very honest with you, my podcast has only been a vehicle for more talented and intelligent people to drop knowledge on me. And that's where it feels genuine, because I get a chance to talk to people like you who are wildly successful and have so much to offer. So I honestly think this is a great episode for people to hear. And I guess before we end it, I'd like to talk about the programs that you have coming on, because a part of this too, I want to make sure people can go to your area and see what you have to offer, virtuals, the programs that you got going on. I know you're currently building stuff, but what else do you have going on that you'd like people to know about?
Okay, thank you. Basically, I started with one of the main issues that people come to me for, because we live in a rural area. There's a lot of rural areas, and which would be reliable recall. A lot of people struggle with reliable recall. And of course, the second thing to that would be reactivity. And for me, the way that I work with reactivity is actually the engagement process, like we've been talking about. And so all the foundational stages of the beginning of channeling in that reactivity or aggression or that arousal with other dogs would be through like the recall program that I created. I actually took over a year to make the program, because I took one puppy that wasn't mine and I invited her in every so often, and we would do training segments and build the chapters of the program to the point where the dog was just over a year old before she went to her new home. And we wanted to test her on the street. We wanted to show some behaviors on the street. We wanted to show in the field off-leash recall around another dog. And then we also took her to the beach, because the beach also has a lot of smells and a lot of information for dogs. And so we went from puppyhood training to watching behaviors. She wasn't an aggressive or reactive dog by any means, but there goes that, the ears gone, right? And so we worked through those challenges. It was a really nice training journey. And it felt like you're watching a story when I went back over and started reviewing it, and it was really nice. And so people have the option to do just the foundational part, which is all of your on-leash training. And then there's also the option for unleashed as well. So there's that I offer. That's like the flagship program right now. And then I also do one-on-one coaching for people. So I do anything from working with obedience to behavior modification through one-on-one coaching online, or if people are local to me or want to travel in, I can do that too. I mainly specialize in one-on-one training when I have clients here anyway. And then I've been working on some healing fix programs, because if you're advancing in healing, a lot of people have head tilting issues or lure baiting issues. So I did kind of like it's more like a lesson than a program, but a lesson surrounding that. And I'm currently making content with reactive dogs and reading. And so I have that in my hard drive right now waiting to be attended to. And I'm also doing a working dog workshop coming up in Ontario in June. So I'll be traveling. I think it's a 20-hour drive roughly. So Biker and I will be on the road a little bit, traveling there too.
That's amazing. That sounds like an absolute clinic on recall. I think when I teach recall, it's just one. Okay, here's my recall trick. Okay, we play this game. Okay, bye.
Yeah. You can have a look at the program, and I'll share that with you.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Yeah, I live in, it's funny. City, California, there's leash laws. Like no one's coming to anybody for a recall training because it's illegal to keep your dog off leash at any point out here. So there's more reactivity than recall, but I have a lot of friends in rural areas and it's flipped on there's no one's doing real reactivity because the dogs have so much space. They're not able to
really
react.
responding.
Yeah. So the problem is just getting the dog back.
Exactly. Yeah. For here, we have both. So it's usually reactivity or come when called issues. There's some behavior mod issues and whatnot, but yeah, it's a little blend of both here because we have like towns close by, and then we also have a lot of wooded and rural areas too.
For anybody that's listening, I would like you to go to her Instagram. What else do you have?
Instagram, YouTube, and my website mainly, and Facebook.
Okay, I'll link all that, but the reason I want you to go to her Instagram, because how I found you, I did the STS thing, took the Nino's course, and that's how I heard about you, and I jumped on your social media. And I'll never forget the first video I saw. You were working your dog, and I guess there was a lot of dust. The dog was going for the ball, and it was like slow-mo.
I remember that.
It was like slow-mo, and the dog was picking up the dust as it was missing the ball, and I was like, holy shit, it was like poetry in motion. It was the coolest thing I'd ever seen.
I gave him a down. Just as he was going to strike, and that's why when the dust finally cleared, he was in a down staring at the ball.
It was like cinematic. I was like, what? That you can do that with animals? And then obviously every video you put out after that, it was much of the same. You have this, just watching you work with animals. And it's funny, you don't speak in most of your posts. You're not saying anything. You're just working your animal. And it's just such a cool thing to watch what is possible. Obviously, you've got a tremendous amount of talent, but you've also got a dog who's also talented. And that's just the coolest thing to watch. We have a lot of things going on dog training. We have different facets, different experts. We all do different things. But there is something to watching talent work with talent, and it's all performance driven. So I hope everybody gets the chance to head over to your social media and see that firsthand. And I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking to me. This has been wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me in your time as well. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Cool. I can cut out I think this is a podcast.
Dude, we got the podcast. Okay, cool. That works.
Yeah, we did it.
Trim it up a little bit.
I'll trim it up. I usually use a different platform. I hope the sound doesn't screw up on Zoom. I usually use a Squadcast platform, but I'll try to run this audio through Adobe, and hopefully, because we were laughing a whole lot, so I'll cut out the parts where we're probably clipping into each other because we're laughing at the same time. And I think the audio will be good enough. And regardless if there's a couple little clicks and whatever, it's good enough that I really do think people are going to learn a lot from this. Like, you're awesome.
Oh, thank you. Likewise, I feel like what you do is absolutely amazing with animals too. And I feel like there's so much that can be learned, like what you were saying in the industry, that so much can be learned back and forth, because I'll never claim to know it all or anything when it comes to animals, because it's constantly changing. Like, I started off, I'm sure my parents were pissed off, but my first word was horse and not mom or dad. Started really young with animals, and they were peace for me. Like, they provided me with peace. They provided me with safety and freedom. Like, whenever I got home from school, mom would be like, get in here, do your homework. And I'd throw the backpack, run to the pasture because I knew I could outrun her, grab my horse, throw baler's twine between the halter and around, open the gate, hop on bareback, and just fly into the woods. I would just go on the horse. And of course, what accompanied the horse? The dog. So I spent a lot of my childhood doing that. And then, of course, the regimented Army cadet side of things. I did crawl up the ranks, even though I didn't enjoy it, but you had to be darn good in order to even get on a Germany exchange. And like I said, I think my mom really was disappointed in the sense that I didn't go the military route. And then I was just like, you know what? I've always loved animals. I want to be with animals. Like, I want to work with animals. And you know, I just love them to pieces. I think they're amazing creatures, and I remember someone saying to me, she worked with working dogs, and she's like, you're never going to want a biker again. And it's actually the complete opposite. I would take him over and over again. I love that dog to pieces. He makes me feel safe. He's not trained to